Everyone, and welcome to Knowful GCSE. Just want to start this live stream off by saying thank you so much for the 400 subscribers. This recently happened, so I just want to say that. But today we're going to be doing some English language practice. So English language paper 2. Now I'm going to be doing these after school live stream sessions, so feel free to join them to make sure that you are being productive. Now, as I said, we're looking at paper 1. English language paper 2. Here is the question set that we're going to use today. So first, however, we're going to look at how to approach English language paper 2, some tips, how I approached it and how I got a grade 9, and what I would recommend you do now. So let me share the screen again with you. So let's just do a bit of revision on GCSE English language, what is required, how much time do we have, etc. So that's a very thick pen. So GCSE English language, right? In terms of timings, the entire of paper 2, exactly like paper 1, lasts 1 hour and 45 minutes. Okay, so 1 hour and 45 minutes, and within this 1 hour and 45 minutes, you have 80 marks. Now I'm going to give you a step-by-step comprehensive guide on how to approach the paper, starting from the very first couple of seconds. So let me just tell you a bit about how it's split first. So we've got section A and section B. Now, section A is the reading section, just how in paper 1. And in section A, you're going to be given 2 non-fiction extracts. Now, they're both going to be linked by the topic, but written in very different styles, different genres, and in different centuries. So there's key points there. You're going to be given 2 different sources. Sources are only to be used in section A. You do different sources, which will normally be in the genre and in the different time period. Now, the topic is one that has changed over time normally. So something like education, parenting, transport. That is the reason why they are giving you 2 extracts from 2 different eras, because they're trying to show whether you can pick up on the subtlety of how things have changed since then on that particular topic. Now, for section A and for section B, you have 1 question. We're going to try and within this half an hour slot. There's a bit of internet. So yes, 4 different questions, and in section B, 1 question. So let's start with section A. What is there to know about the different questions? So for section A, we have question 1, which is a short multiple choice question. You'll be asked a basic question, because the reason why you're given such an easy question to begin with is because this paper is not tiered into high and foundation. Everyone is given the same paper. Therefore, the first question is multiple choice. And it's a short question requiring a short answer, so it will only be 4 marks. Now, question 2 is an 8 marker. Now, this 8 marker will always start the same way. It's called the summary question. So you will normally be asked, write a summary with using both sources about something, something, something. So you'll be asked to write a summary about something. Now, question 3 of section A is a 12 marker. And this 12 marker will be, how does the writer use language to describe whatever you're being asked to describe? So, how has language been used to describe ... So that's a language question, but at the same time, they don't want you to talk about analysis. They want you to just identify the techniques and don't go too much into the connotations of the writer. That's what literature is all about. Now, the question 4 of the section A is 16 marks. And this 16 marks will be compare. So similarly to the summary question, however, for the compare question, you won't be asked to list out differences and similarities. You'll be asked to use things like quotes and talk about your influence on them as a reader. Now, I'll talk about that more in detail. But let's begin by zooming in to each of the questions. So the multiple choice question, let's look at that first, question 1. And let's look at the example question set that I've put up. So again, as I said, question 1, it's a multiple choice. You're going to be given 8 statements and 4 of them are going to be true. You have to just mark in the circle just like this, whichever one you believe is true. So this is, in terms of assessment objectives, this is AO1. Now note, AO1, AO2, AO3, AO4, all of the assessment objectives in English language is totally different to English literature, so don't use the same thing. AO1 in this case is to identify and interpret explicit and implicit bits of data. What this is just saying is, how can you easily notice the obvious bits of information, the explicit, and the implicit, what is meant, what reading between the lines. That's a technique. So step 1, I would say, when you say, the question will normally look like this. Let me open the question sheet now. So as you can see, so read again from the first part of source 1A from lines 1 to 18. Now, let's zoom in on this question. So I don't want to spend too much time on the 4 marker here. However, it is 4 marks, which can be the difference between a grade 9 and a grade 8 and a grade 7. So you need to make sure you're doing this right. So read again the first part of the source. So you're given a line reference here. First thing I think we should do is mark that out on the extract. So 1 to 18. So let's look at the extract. This one is one of the numbered ones, and this is the question 1 zone. Okay. And then we're told, choose 4 statements which are true. So I would say read that first section before we say which one is true or false. So let's read that together. Keep an eye out for John Travolta, laughs our driver, as we peer out of the taxi window, hoping to spot a warthog or two in the African bush. We are on our way to the Swiss Chamois Game Reserve in South Africa's Eastern Cape, one of the world's leading luxury safari destinations, an occasional treat for various species of celebrity. My boyfriend Tony and I are minutes until our first. Our ranger, Ryan, gives a passionate introduction to the reserve, explaining the rich and diverse ecosystem, which contains 5 out of the 7 South African biomes, within a 25,000 hectare malaria-free plot. We ask our newly formed group of 6 what we'd like to see most, and on the face of it, it seems enthused by our most collective responses: lions. Okay, so we've read the first part of that extract, and now let's answer the question 1. So question 1, shade the boxes of the ones you think are true. So the writer sees John Travolta when she arrives in South Africa. The first safari trip takes place very quickly after arrival. The game reserve is very popular and fashionable. The staff at the game reserve enjoy their jobs. The writer is travelling alone. The group are only interested in seeing big animals like lions. So we definitely know that's true. The reserve contains a variety of different plants and animals. Yep, because that's what's meant by the biomes. The tourist must take precautions against the malaria virus. Now, we know that it's a malaria-free area, so we don't have to worry about that, as it was mentioned there. Now, for the other 2, let's just read over it again. So we're told about the game reserve, and it said it's one of the world's leading luxury safari destinations, and it's an occasional retreat for different animals. So we can definitely say here it's very popular and fashionable because it's luxury. Now, they arrive 10 minutes until their first game drive. Our ranger Ryan gives a passionate introduction to the reserve, explaining. Now, by this word passionate, it suggests that he is passionate and the worker does enjoy his job. So we can definitely mark the one that says the staff at the game reserve enjoy their jobs. And that is the 4 points. And that's 4 marks. Now, in terms of timing, do not spend any more than 4 minutes on this. As you can see, that did not take us 4 minutes, even though we were going through it together. Um, feel free to put into the chat any of your answers that you think from this point onwards, and any of your suggestions for how we should handle this. So note that also for this question, this is language paper 2 question 1, and this is actually harder than language paper 1 question 1, because this actually makes you have to infer, which means read between the lines, whereas language paper 1 just asks you to state 4 things you can notice about the extract. And furthermore, this is also harder because of the fact you can have trick questions, because it can be worded similarly to the text but still be wrong. That's why you should try to not spend under 2 minutes and over 4 minutes, because you want to make sure you don't lose 4 petty marks. And here is a tip as well. Another tip is that these statements from A to H are presented in chronological order to the text. So this is a really helpful tip, because this means that as you read through A, B, and C and read through the first part, you can quickly read through and then go back and check if they're right, because our memories are very flippant during an exam situation. So that's also a really good tip. Now let's look at question 2. So first of all, let's look at some information on question 2. So question 2, as we said, is the 8-mark summary question. Okay, so it will normally go like this. So let me show you back to the PDF, because that shows what a typical question 2 looks like. So it normally goes like this. You now need to refer to the source A and the source B in this question. And then it will give a statement. So in this case, the statement is, the experiences of the writers in Africa are very different. Use details from both sources to write a summary of the different activities. Now, I actually have a special tip for you. So I would suggest, because this is a summary of the entire of the extracts, you're not given line references, and we're told about the experiences, I would recommend doing this question later, because the next question, question 3, which is the 12 marker, is language analysis on a particular section. So here's lines 22 to the end. So after you've done your language analysis and you've read the text, you're going to have a better understanding, and that will stand you in a better stead to do your summary of the 2 texts afterwards, as opposed to doing it before you've even read the text properly. I hope that makes sense. So we're actually going to do question 3 first. Now, question 3, as we said, is language analysis. So this is 12 marks, and this will be assessing you on the assessment objective AO2. Now, again, it's different from literature. AO2 is explaining, commenting on, and analysing how writers use language to achieve their effects and influence readers. So in language, it's how writers use language to achieve effects and influence readers, whereas in literature, it's the methods used. Now, again, this is directed to a specific section of the text, which is really useful. And in terms of going into analysis, don't go into literary context. Don't think too much. Now, I would suggest spending 18 minutes because it's roughly 1.5 minutes per mark. Mr. Sally's really does emphasize this in his videos, and I would definitely agree here. So 18 minutes. 18 minutes for this question. Language, but don't look into literary context. Now, again, directed to a specific section of the text and asked to analyze it. Now, in the previous 2 exams, there's been 2 on the modern text and 2 on the 19th century text, and this has ranged from lines 7 to 16. So you need to be prepared for either one and be ready for both of them. So let's look and zoom further into this. So we've got from lines 22 to the end, so let's skip to that. 22 to the end of source B. So we've got 22 to the end, this section here. And the question is asking us, how is he used language to convey a sense of threat and intimidation? Okay, so we've got threat and intimidation. Let's just zoom into those words. For everyone who's joined us, we are now on question 3. So we've done question 1, and we're coming back to question 2. So I hope that makes sense. If you feel like you need to watch it from the beginning, feel free to just skip back 15 minutes ago. Okay. So let's go into the 2 words used. So we're told about threat and intimidation. How has the writer used language to convey these feelings? So let's quickly go back to that extract and go and zoom in to that section. So let's read it. And as I read it, I would like you to take some notes of some language techniques that you think within this section here that convey this sense of threat, intimidation, fear, things like that, trepidation. So let's look at it. And I will underline as well as we're reading. We have sufficient time to take a view of the might force bearing down on us, and to count the number of the war vessels which have been collected from the living stone and its great affluent. There are 54 of them. A monster canoe leads the way, with 2 rows of upstanding paddles, 40 men on a side, their bodies bending and swaying in unison with a swelling barbarous chorus. They drive her down towards us. In the bow, standing on what appears to be a platform, are 10 prime young warriors, their heads bright with feather of the parrot, crimson and grey. At the stern, 8 men with long paddles, whose tops are decorated with ivory balls, guide the monster vessel. And dancing up and down from the stern to stern are 10 men, who appear to be chiefs. The crashing sound of large drums, 100 blasts from ivory horns, and a thrilling chant from 2,000 human throats do not tend to soothe. We have no time to pray, or to take sentimental looks at the savage world, or even breathe a sad farewell to it. So many other things have to be done speedily and well. As the foremost canoe comes rushing down, and its consorts on either side beating the water into foam, and raising their jets of water into sharp prows, I turn to take a last look at our people, and say to them, "Boys, be firm as iron, wait until you see the first spear, and then take good aim. Don't fire all at once, keep aiming until you are sure of your man. Don't think of running away, for only your guns can save you." Okay, so we've read that section. Now, going back to the question of threat and intimidation. So for question 3, you'll either be asked about a person, an experience, or a setting. So this is quite a rare one. You're asked about threat and intimidation, but you can definitely link this to the people that are experiencing these. Now, some tips for this question. You need to be specific. So, specifically talk about the effects of the writer's language choices. Don't talk about context, why they might have used it in, and how it links to their life. Just talk about what is the reason behind the choice? Does it increase the thrill and things like that? And another reason, talk and try and pinpoint what is the specific effect that the writer is trying to achieve. Is it to characterize a person, or is it to present feelings about an experience? So let's talk about some things we can possibly say about this extract. So how is language used to talk about threat and intimidation? So I have underlined some things in green. I said blasts, thrilling, beating. Now, these, except for blast actually, no, except for thrilling, all of these are verbs. Now, these verbs all have a sense of violence, crashing, blast, beating. So this is a semantic field. Sorry, my handwriting is very bad on the screen, but hopefully you can hear me. So, semantic field of violent verbs. Now, how does this help to achieve this thrilling and intimidated atmosphere? It It characterizes the threat that they are feeling and that they face, and characterizes it by these active verbs which highlight the physical timidness of the people on the boat. Now, that's one language technique. Let's see what else we can use. So, do we see any similes? Do we see any metaphors? Now, there definitely was one metaphor here, or simile. So we've got boys, be firm as iron. Now, firm as iron, this is a simile. There will always be a simile discussed in this question, question 3. So what is this simile saying? Be firm as iron. What the writer is trying to do is, through the connotations of iron being tough, unbreakable, unbeatable, emphasizes the fact that this is what the boys need to grow towards, because of the fact that they are timid and they are shaking and they do feel threatened. Now, these words of advice, therefore, highlight the intensity of the threat and intimidating feelings that these soldiers have. Now, another language technique that we can see here is the imperatives in this last dialogue. So you have don't fire all at once, don't think of running away, keep aiming. So these are imperatives. He's instructing them. And also, another language technique is the use of dialogue. So this dialogue not only characterizes this figure as someone who's trying to keep calm under the pressure of the circumstance, but he's trying to control the sense of threat. So through these imperatives, you can say, the writer aims to highlight how the character tries to tightly control the sense of threat and how he feels he has to combat it by being strict and sharp. So we've talked about the verbs, we've talked about the simile, we've talked about the imperatives, and let's see if there's any other language techniques that we can use. To count the number of war vessels, now this is a metaphor early on, because we know that they aren't actually war vessels. He's using this in order to convey the very damaging, the very violent connotations of war, the things that destroy, destruction, death. All of these connotations, therefore, are coupled with this idea of them being vessels, strong, fortified, things like that, creates a sense of threat. Now, we can also talk about how the vessel is then later referred to as a monster vessel. So you can talk about the development of this from a war to a monster. So war tends to be something that's connoted with real life it's existing, it's physical. A monster is something that's unseen, it's treacherous, it's beyond anyone's imagination because no one's actually experienced it. It's progressively getting worse and worse, and how the vessel is getting more out of this world. Okay, so I would answer this question 3 with you, but I want to get through as many of the questions as possible within this time period. So I just would suggest if you want to answer this question, feel free to. You can take a note of it. But now let's return to question 2. So remember, question 2, the summary question. Now think, we haven't actually even read both of the extracts, yet we are able to answer both question 1 and question 3, which is amazing. So don't think and don't do what many other people suggest of spending 15 minutes on both extracts, because firstly, that is a waste of time. You're going to forget everything the moment you start answering the questions, so you're going to have to refer back to it anyway. Do this SMART method so that you have more time to answer the question as opposed to just rereading the information. Okay, question 2. So as we said, it's a summary question and that you'll be given a statement. So in this case, statement is, the experiences of the writers in Africa are very different. Now we have to write a summary of the differences. Now note, question 2, you're always going to be asked to write a summary, but sometimes they'll say write a summary of the differences. Sometimes they'll say write a summary of the similarities. And you need to watch out for this because a lot of people start discussing both similarities and differences. However, we need to pay attention. They're only asking for the differences. Okay, now this tends to be a narrow focus. Okay, you may be like, there is not much to say about this, and that's true because for question 2, the AQA exam board have purposely had and implemented a narrow focus. The reason why is because they don't want you to have much material to use. Is this where you use point, quotation, inference? I would definitely say I remember doing it as retrieving the information, so yes, that's the point, then inferring, and don't talk about too much about the methods and marks. So that's definitely a correct way of doing it as well. But just be careful with the quotation. Try not to do too much analysis on it. Okay. But yeah, that's correct. So you must infer. Now, inferring is a key skill in question 2 and question 2 alone. Inferring is basically being perceptive, showing you understand the text and being able to fluidly respond to it without having to feel like you're overanalyzing every single bit. So how I would say approach this question, just how you did in the chat. Thank you very much for your contribution. So make your point. So find 3 points of differences. Then infer and talk about your quotes as well. So let's actually try and answer this, or at least get some points for it. So the writer's experiences in Africa, how are they different? Well, I would definitely recommend going through this chronologically. That's definitely an easier way to do this. So, firstly, what do we notice about this? We say, keep an eye out for John Travolta laughs, our driver laughs. We've got this idea of laughing, hoping, they arrive early, the passionate, the rich and diverse. Look at this vocabulary here. So, first of all, you can talk about the verbs of laughing, the verbs of hoping. Now, don't feel like talking about verbs is too pernickety, like in literature where the examiners look down if you look too much at the verb, the noun. They want you to do this in language. Now, in extract 1, the verbs are very positive, laughs, hoping, they're very jovial. Now, let's compare that to the verbs here early on. We see, in these wild regions, our mere presence excited the most furious passion of hate and murder. So we've really got this idea of hate and murder. And this kind of oxymoronic language as well, with excitement of death, of hate and murder. So this oxymoron and furious as well. So if you're comparing excitement with fury, that's definitely a very interesting thing to talk about. So you can say how in our first point could be how within the first extract, through the use of the jovial positive verbs, this creates a sense of excitement and happiness. Whereas in the second extract, this sense of excitement is very oxymoronic and it's used to highlight the in reality furious and hateful nature of what is to come. So that's a really good point. You can make that. So that's the first point. Now let's find another point. So let's read this paragraph here. At 2 p.m., heralded by savage shouts from the wasp storm. So, first of all, what do we notice here? Sibilance, which is alliteration of the S sound. Savage shouts from the wasp storm. Again, this S sound is really prevalent here. So, sibilance. It creates a sense of snake like language, how it's being possibly sour, possibly quite uncomforting. And this is how this setting is. It's very discomforting, which from some cause or other are usually exultant. We emerge out of the shelter of the deeply wooded banks in presence of a vast affluent, nearly 2,000 yards across at the mouth. We pull briskly on to gain the right bank and come in view of the right branch of the affluent, when, looking upstream, we see a sight that sends the blood tingling through every nerve and fibre of the body. So let's highlight that. That's a really good use of language here, and we can use that. Arouses not only our most lively interest, but also our most lively apprehensions. So, first of all, I don't want to talk too much about structure here, but it's a complex sentence, lots of detail within it, highlighting the very complex nature of their emotions. The blood tingling through every nerve. So this is a hyperbole, or hyperbole, however you say it. It's exaggeration, intense exaggeration. And this characterizes the fear that's instilled in them. Now, they feel fear. Now let's look back at the question. Are we asked about how the characters feel? Not exactly. We're asked about the experiences of the writers. How are they different? So we can definitely say that the second extract is very fearful, very scared, and they do this through the use of the hyperbole, the sibilance. It's kind of creeping up on you, the slowly increasing tension. So there's an increasing tension in the right in this earlier experience, the speed at which he drives. We skid down valleys, bounce out of our seat, like huge, oversized, brittle dandelions. Let's look at that simile. And this can be our second point of difference here. I'm sorry if this is cutting out, I just realised, but hopefully you can still hear me. So this is our second point of difference here. We can say how in extract 1, a simile is used, and it's very light, joyous, like huge, oversized, brittle dandelions. The sense of calmness and being able to enjoy the peaceful atmosphere. Whereas here, it's very much the opposite: scared, high risk. Everyone's on red alert, things like that. So that can be our second point. Now, our third point. What else can we say about the differences? Now, note point 1 and 2 is very similar. So, point 1, we said how there's a difference in mood. They both have this sense of excitement, but on this one, it's more of oxymoronic and angry. Whereas the initial one, it's more laughable and light-hearted. And then our second point was about the scared nervousness and trepidation. So they're very similar points. So now we want to get a point that's a bit different. So maybe we can achieve that by going lower down in the text. So Yet after a moment's reflection, as I note the number of savages and the daring manner of their pursuit, the desire of our canoes to abandon the steady, compact line, I give the order to drop the anchor. Drop anchor. Four of us them and threaten them with my guns. This compelled them to return to the line, which is formed of 11 double canoes anchored 10 yards apart. The boat moves up, which is to the front, and takes position of 50 yards above them. So there's a lot of numerical values here. Four of our canoes, 10 yards apart, 50 yards apart, 11 double canoes. It's very overbearing, the sense of numeracy and numbers and how there's a specific amount of things. Could we compare how in source A the writer has a driver, but in source B it's a first person experience of a leader? Yes, that's a very good point, actually. I think that would get you quite a few marks. As long as you say that in source A, they although they have a driver, they are experiencing it first-handedly as well. So you can just talk about how in source A, the experience is definitely second-handedly felt, whereas in experience B is first-personally felt. So it's the way you word that, but that's a perfectly valid point. So well done. And yeah, that could be it. So just going back to this, there's lots of numerical values here, which definitely puts the pressure up, suggests how there's a sense of accuracy. There's a sense that everything can almost go wrong at once. Whereas in source A, there is a very calming sense. You can see the agility of the baby rhino. So it's almost the ease. And we see, in terms of numbers, we see her 1 ton weight over in one breath. Now, this severely contrasts the second extract. In the second, and you, in order to achieve them, it's vital that you have 10 boats, 11 boats, etc. Whereas in this one, 1 ton of weight can be swept away in one breath. Now, this shows the ease, the lack of complications. And there you go. There are 3 points. But definitely, the one in the chat is very good. So well done for finding that out. So yeah, that's question 1, 2, and 3 done. Let me just talk over question 4 now. So let's look at question 4 here. So this is the 16 marker comparing sources. So in this case, it says compare how the writers have conveyed their different views about Africa and the experiences they have. Now, ironically, this is literally exactly the same question as question 2. Because in question 2, they're talking about the experiences, and in question 4, they're talking about their different views about Africa and the experiences they have. So, unfortunately, this is a really bad example because it's really similar. Whereas, because this is a practice, in your actual exams, these questions tend to be a bit different. So, I don't think this will be a good one to practice, but just look at the structure. So, we compare how the writers and then whatever it will be. Now, note, you can either ask to be compared about different ideas or similar ideas. Now, again, we're talking about different, sorry. So it's a repetition of question 2. So firstly, you have to demonstrate your understanding of text ideas and your attitudes. And then secondly, you have to compare the methods. So you're comparing your understanding and then your methods. But again, don't go too much into literary context. Now, things to talk about. You may be stuck for this question. How would you talk about how would you compare them? Now, I would suggest using things like talking about things like imperatives, symbolism, juxtaposition, structure. Luckily, here you're not limited to talk about language or structure. You can talk about both, which is really useful. Now, key point here: avoid writing about the character's view. Okay, don't characterize it. Remember, you're writing about the writer's attitudes, the real life writer, not the character. the non-fiction exam. So don't talk too much about characters because I really don't like that. Okay, and that is all I have to say about question 2, really. In terms of how to structure your answer, no introduction is needed, no conclusion is needed. Just what, how, why paragraph. So what have they done? How have they done it? Why have they done it? Discuss them simultaneously as well. Okay, so you can see in this that we're saying compare how the writers have conveyed it. You need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B, but don't make the mistake of talking about them separately. Try to discuss them simultaneously. This is a tip for getting those higher, upper marks. Talk about them simultaneously and tactically. Make a point about the beginning of the text, I would say. Make a point about the ending of the text, and therefore you're showing your development of ideas as well, without having to explicitly discuss it. And this is all the tips I would give, just in terms of timing if you wanted. Again, 1.5 minutes, so 24 minutes for this question. So 24 minutes for question 4, 18 minutes for this question, 12 minutes for the 8 marker. Now, normally your teachers would say 1 mark per minute if you're spending 15 minutes reading. But luckily, in my way, you're able to spend more time writing, which is clearly the more important bit. Now, unfortunately, we didn't have time today to look over section B, but we're going to do that tomorrow, same time today that we did 2 live streams, normally starting at around 10 past 5, quarter past 5, and going on till 6 or 6:15. So feel free to join, and if it made you feel productive, feel free to leave a like. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.